the gap between the open source model and the closed frontier model are very, very small now.
Building models and deploying them is a very challenging game economically and technically speaking, and frankly is not one that I would recommend.
You marry the open source models with your data, and then you can fine-tune it specific to your use cases. What that means is that you unlock even better capability than the frontier models.
With coding agents, it just makes it a more level playing field. You don't need that many developers. You can do a lot more. And so it makes it fun advantage to have.
So thanks everybody for being gathered here today. Like Ryan mentioned, the premise here is really about open and closed source models. I think everybody has seen over the past 1 year, open source models be taking more attention. I think particularly from the China side of things and even from OpenAI himself releasing GPT-OSS. There's been a lot of talk about what is really relevant for builders today, both at a junior level as well as I think at a company enterprise level, right? So perhaps the first question, the first big one we're going to kick it off is really the panelists here. What do you think is such a big deal about open source models? Why not just ChatGPT, whatever GPT-O5 is using, Claude, so on and so forth? What is the purpose of open source models that you think is so relevant today?
So basically, I'll give you a quick introduction about Moonshot. So we are an AI company, leading AI company from China, founded 2023. So our founder actually is one of the most impactful person from China, similar to DeepSeek's founder as well. We found the company actually, last year, basically, we launched the open source model, K2, in July, which we received very, very positive feedbacks globally. And that's why we see there's so much opportunity outside of China. And then I got, hired into the team and also look after the international businesses. So basically, from our end, we do see there are a lot of potentials within the open source side because, first of all, there are so many different use cases which require very specific, requirements, which a frontier model may not be able to be the best option for them. That's the first thing. Second thing is, we can build a huge community which are working on this model and improve the model along the way. And I think the third thing is for us is, to make sure we do have some options to the market because open source or closed, it's the approach to the market. Basically, it's the same thing. So we want to have a better way, to work with our customers and partners in these areas and explore the potential of AI. Because it's still very early stage in the AI space. Everyone is, looking or learning how to use AI. But actually, there are so many use cases we need still, explore. And also, we need to change our mindset to a more like AI native mindset to understand how we can, work together to get more use cases in this space. And the last thing is, for our end, we are very focusing on like coding and also agentic use cases. And we receive a lot of comparisons in the field, especially in one of the launch events at CES this year, just a couple of days ago in the States. If you look at the media launch event, Jensen Huang put up a huge graph. So you can see the gap between the open source model and the closed frontier model are very, very small now. Kimi as the leading space in the open source side. And also we are trying to release our new models as well in the coming months, which we hope to even have a dramatic leap in the intelligence part.
Exciting. So actually, then maybe David on chime in. I think you guys, Alibaba's been Queen, which is one of the top few open source models right now, right? What's your take on it? What's so special that you guys want to dive down into this?
I think 2 points. So, like mentioned, the frontier models cannot get the data from everywhere, right? And companies like yourself, enterprises yourself, because you are closer to the customer, because you interact with them day to day, you have the rich data there. And it's something that the frontier models cannot always get. So with the open source models, you marry the open source models with your data, and then you can fine-tune it specific to your use cases. What that means is that you unlock even better capability than the frontier models. I think that's the first one. The second one is that because it's open source model, that kind of unlocks the gatekeeping of these models. So what that means is that model providers, like cloud providers, can use other people's models and deploy on themselves. So like Quen is also on Bedrock and Kimi is also on Alibaba. So essentially, there's no more gatekeeping. And what that means is for enterprises like yourself, you have a lot of choice. You can choose whichever is nearer to you, whichever is cheaper, whichever does best for your environment. Yeah, these are my 2 points.
I think I'll just cut in here to ask like Thomas another question. It just came to mind. So it's like we've talked about the advantages of open source models, right? So in this case, maybe you probably wouldn't know because you're not OpenAI senior leadership, right? But what do you think then was that? Come on, he's great. APAC senior leadership.
Am I only allowed to respond if I disagree?
No, it's perfectly fine. I think my question was along the lines like, okay, so we see there's very clear advantages in the open source model realm, right? So what do you think went for the direction? Like you mentioned, you guys started as a research lab. Why didn't you guys go with this open source direction instead? You guys went for the closed model frontier. And what was the kind of like, what do you think is the rationale behind it?
Okay, I'm going to counterintuitively explain the advantages of open source models first. Okay, so and my response will be a bit skewed by my perspective, which is very startup centric. But as we've kind of gone throughout the region, I think I've spoken with at this point like hundreds of companies, right? And of course, at the end of the day, we are a frontline team. One of the first questions we ask is, what models are you using? And I would say, generally speaking, I'm not sure if this tracks with your experience, but 9 times out of 10, they're using some sort of commercial closed model for the most part, right? Usually it's a primary model. Maybe there's some open source or fine-tuned model as a secondary model, depending on the use case. But for the most part, it is a closed source model. And so the question is, what about the other ones that are actually using open source models as their primary model? My current perspective is that there are a few scenarios, a few use cases where it's actually a very good idea to use an open source model on usually your own stack for the most part. So one is if you're doing it for compliance reasons, right? And I think this tracks very heavily with whether or not an industry is comfortable with cloud generally or not. I made a trip to Taiwan recently, and many of the AI app layer companies there are building in manufacturing. It's not exactly a compliance issue per se, but many of the manufacturers who are in semicon and otherwise are very protective of their IP, and they actually will air gap a lot of things. They are not hosting things on cloud, right? And of course, if they're not hosting things on cloud, there's no way they're going to be using our APIs to build a product to serve this particular audience. And so under this scenario, it actually, I have come across many companies that are building a model, fine-tuning it, or using another model and fine-tuning it, or whatever, and then sort of hosting it on-prem in servers within the walls of their customers. This is one use case that I've seen quite a bit. This is also the case in industries and in countries where there are stricter compliance requirements when it comes to data regulations. For example, Australia, India, there's less sensitivity around like financial services, information, and data. Those are on healthcare, right? And so under these scenarios, you often will end up using something on-prem in order to get around the InfoSec requirements or the compliance requirements of your end clients in the first place. Second is there are some use cases where for various reasons, whether it's guardrails or just like training content, the frontier models or closed source models are not suitable, right? They can't do the thing that you needed to do. As one example, one company we work with is called Pix AI, Singapore, Japan company with a number of developers. They're focused on like anime type style, character generation, and so on. They actually ended up training their own image model for performance and for taste reasons, and I think are hosting it in a data center in Johor. And they've done quite well. They've gained a lot of traction because they have built a model to their own. I think it was based on a third-party model, based on their own use case, right? And so they've been able to deliver a particularly unique experience for their end users. Now, for third piece, I think there are some companies that are just a bit more concerned around training data, about making sure they have something proprietary, and so are a bit more reluctant to use closed source models. For our part, we do not train on anything that comes through the API, so that is less of an issue. Whether or not you believe us is often subjective. And so I think for those that are a bit more paranoid when it comes to this sort of thing, they often will zero out open source models and kind of build on their own tech stack.
I don't think we have a choice to believe or not. We just have to. There's a few options. Yeah.
Eugene,
Prisoner of options in a lot of way. Okay, so I think I kind of want to dive a bit deeper, right? I think a lot of us, if not like 80% or 90% of us in the room here are builders, right? We kind of talk a bit about like Kimi, Queen, and then like GPT and so on, right? When you think of like successful teams, when it comes to like model selection process as a whole, right? What are they doing different? I'm less so interested in terms of like which is the right model to choose, but in terms of like what's the thinking process that you see teams have exhibited.
I think I'll direct this question to like Pandu as well, because I think you've definitely seen everybody here has seen that individual models, how are they doing? But I think you, as part of AWS at the infrastructure level, you do see what your clients are using and stuff. What's your perspective on this?
I work again with a lot of startups, part of solution architecture, leading solution architecture for startups in this part of the world. And as a result of that, we end up seeing very, very similar patterns across a lot of different startups, right? And one of the things that we see typically is that the first thing that an organization looks at is how do they use AI. It's either for a productivity enhancement or a customer experience enhancement, or it could be some sort of economic advantage that they want to get. And when they're doing that, they obviously have a theory of sorts that they need to first prove. So that hypothesis has to be first proved. And I don't think most startups tend to kind of go start deploying and doing everything or that needs to be done for setting up models first. They try to kind of first get their idea validated, and that's where going to an existing model like maybe OpenAI or Anthropic or one of these models and just calling the API, and that's where also where we provide a service that just gives them a standard API with a whole bunch of models behind it. There is what we call closed models. There's open weights models. We have 18 different open weights model providers on the Bedrock service, and you could just kind of mix and match and experiment and try and first validate your hypothesis. Once you do get to that point, then you need to actually make some choices on it might be a use case that has an enormous number of tokens that kind of flow through it, right? So if you look at coding use cases, we have a Kiro, which is our autonomous agent for coding. We've had 250,000 plus developers that have downloaded Kiro with trillions of tokens that have passed through that. But if it's a startup that's doing that, they need to really look at whether that works for them in what they are charging the customer and how many tokens they are using. And that's where we typically see that they start trading off between, should I use an open weights model and actually fine tune it for my use case, which may give me a very different kind of economic way of kind of hosting that model, versus should I use an API based service where I'm doing an input and output kind of token. And that's how we typically see startups that are a little more at the later stage of their project, where they have already started realizing some benefits. They then start looking at optimization, and then they start looking at all the other things that come in. And the fundamental areas of security, resilience, and getting cost optimization and operational excellence, that does not change, right? So that's still there as basic sort of cloud architecture that you need to kind of set up all those other building blocks as well.
Definitely, so it's definitely a guiding star in a way that kind of makes that decision.
Yeah, maybe let me chime in. So I think that other than points you mentioned, I think another thing that developers should look at is, most importantly, what is your test set and what does good mean to you? Because I think in the past, when there's a few models, people are like, oh, I want to use this model, I want to use this model. But actually this model might not be the best model for a use case. And a lot of people just go into it blindly and I'm just going to try, it looks good, then, but there's no systematic way to test. Like maybe 100 examples, okay, and these 100 examples are split into these categories. It does one of this. Then I cannot say that my current model is X and I want to replace it with Y. Is Y really doing better than X? I cannot say that. So given a good test set, you can do this. And after you've already deployed this, you can use the test set to measure whether the current model is still the best. So I'll say first one is to get a good test set. Second one is, I think, don't choose one model, but allow yourself to have high availability. Like, cloud, you have many ways to choose. If one thing goes down, you have another thing. So there are solutions like Open Router and whatnot that allow you to swap over between models. I think that's the second thing.
What I would add, and I realize the ground rules are I'm supposed to disagree if I talk, right? But
please,
I'm gonna go yes and instead.
Okay.
So I'm disagreeing with your ground rules, and therefore I'm allowed to talk, right? So our experience so far is that the typical developer we work with is kind of operating off of vibes, which is fine, right? And there is definitely a role for individual taste and intuition. I think it'd be very helpful, particularly when you're starting. But once you get to the point where you have a test data set, we start to preach like nonstop the importance of evals. And it is actually still, I think, relatively uncommon for developers to be using evals in a very rigorous way, right? But we do strongly encourage testing, even within like the OpenAI family of models, using evals to make sure that you are getting the best cost performance ratio possible within your choice of models, right? Our expectation in many ways is that the most sophisticated developers we work with are testing and experimenting with and adopting various models for various use cases. And so we encourage companies to do this for their own good. We recognize that probably we will not have 100% of wallet share. That's highly unlikely at this point in most cases. And so we do want to make sure you're using the best model for a given job.
You are focused a bit more on international go-to-market, right? So you guys have used Kimi to great success, I think, within the Chinese market. When you approach this outside of China, when you're doing commercialization in San Fran here in Singapore, do you feel that there's a different kind of user or builder perspective when it comes to choosing these models as well?
Actually, there not much difference.
Okay.
Basically, I feel like all the developers and also all the AI pioneers are looking for the best performance models. In particular, use cases. Like I shared, we do have some customers who are using some of the features from our models. For example, the agent I mentioned. They are doing deep research, which requires the model itself to run 4 or 5 hours, call like 200, 300 rounds of different tools and search on the web to get the results. And we do see, our customers' feedback. They are using different models to do the same job. They found out even for OpenAI, after probably 100 rounds of tool calls and stuff, the performance is similar. But after 150, 200, or 300 rounds, a lot of models, they forgot what they are supposed to do from the beginning.
Yep.
So I guess that's one of the thing we are very strong and capable of.
Right.
So that's why we do have a lot of customers who are in the research fields, doing finance research, either medical research, science research. They choose our models because we are really strong in that particular space. Besides that, our cost basically is only a fraction comparing to the frontier models. Basically, with the same input output, we only cost about 20-30% of of the overall cost comparing to like cloud OpenAI. So that's another reason a lot of our customers are choosing our models for their business.
Okay.
Maybe let me, based on the ground rules, let me disagree with his point.
Go for it.
First one.
Yes.
I don't think that selling models to the Chinese market and selling models to the international market is the same at all. And because I cover the Chinese market, I cover the international market, this is a pain for me.
Right.
Our models, because they come from the Chinese market, are trained mostly on Chinese market data.
Right.
So what happens is they do perform slightly better on those languages. And when it comes to the other markets, they are not as performant, or they have different kind of capabilities. So I give some examples. If I want to do a certain model for role play, in the Chinese market, the criteria, the blocking standard is super high. Like you cannot talk about certain topics, I cannot mention here. Cannot talk about certain people, I cannot mention here.
Yep.
Whereas if you come to the international market, these are all free flow. Right. So what that means is that the bar is quite different, and the training portion, the training criteria is very different. So that means I actually do see two different markets. So a lot of the cases that we bring back to the product side to kind of fine tune for international market is new because of this issue.
He's disagreeing, but he's still kind of defending Moonshot as well. So props to that.
We are safe.
What a save.
Nothing a fight today. I do want to hold on to that thought though and go perhaps maybe 5, maybe not 10 years, maybe 5 to 7 years down the road, right, in the future, right, which is our next discussion question, which is that there's been a lot of talk about how everybody's kind of fighting at the model layer right now. Who's the best at reducing compute costs, which is the most efficient model, so on and so forth. We do think that it'll reach a point in time where models will eventually be purely commoditized, kind of like SaaS right now, right? Which is like everybody kind of built onto the model and then deliver the final product, which then ties into what you're mentioning about how originally models are trained slightly differently, have different use cases, different data sets. But we do think that eventually in the era where models are so commoditized, post-training and reinforcement learning, so on and so forth, all the stuff will be done individually in-house, usually be enterprises or startups, to kind of develop that pure application that they need. So at that point, is there a need for such competition between the model builders that you guys are building? That's my real question to you guys.
I think we're pretty far from that scenario, to be honest with you. I mean, generally speaking, I do not see the typical company, whether enterprise or startup, having the right data sets to do the internal training, right? And at least given the current level of tooling, it's still comparatively rare, I think, unless they have like an AI researcher in house, at least based on my experience, to see them fine tuning a model, right? And this is, I think, something that can be done with assistance through external service providers. But I think the idea of bringing fine tuning for like a kind of a general, highly capable model that is highly fine tunable using in-house tools and in-house data is, I think we're minimally a few steps away from that.
Yep.
I think there are two parts to this, right? So one is in the last 2 years, if you looked at it, it started with models being more like, here's a question, here's an answer kind of thing. We moved very quickly away from that. And I think a lot of very impressive demos to measurable outcomes, we were stuck somewhere between that. We saw a lot of enterprises trying to say, oh, should I get into AI? Should I not get into AI? Should I wait and all that? What we saw changing in the last year in 2025 was a lot of the agentic AI, right?
Yes.
So when agents came in and they were able to kind of start planning, reasoning, and acting on your behalf, they were able to kind of bring a lot of that value. And the models really that started doing a lot more reasoning, and pretty much all the models started having a lot more reasoning capabilities, started making the agents more valuable. And we actually started saying, that's something that we can use, and we can actually automate a bit of work and do that. And what emerged alongside that was a bunch of other things. Like we put out an open source SDK called Strands to build agents, and it's been like super popular. A lot of developers kind of using that to kind of build things. But there's also things like MCP and agent-to-agent protocols, and swarms of agents, and all of those different patterns that kind of emerged, which helps us to kind of just imagine a future where there'll probably be like billions of agents that are enhancing our lives both at work and outside of work, and just doing a whole bunch of work in the background, right? So, and we definitely can see that future. And one of the things we're doing at AWS is to try and see how we can prepare the world for that particular future by providing services that run these agents autonomously and do that well. The second part, which I'd say early days for what Thomas was saying about companies going and building their own models, but we do see that that is a possibility as we go ahead. One of the things we announced at reInvent, which is our flagship conference that happened in December, is allowing organizations, and today is probably organizations that have tons of data of their own, they can take our own model called Nova and use different checkpoints of that model, and then do a fine-tuned version where their data is kind of baked into the foundation model itself. Not a fine-tuning, but they're actually building their own foundation model from scratch. And we're trying to kind of just play with that idea and say that there is a possibility in the future that every organization starts investing in building your own sort of foundation models as well. So that's it's still too early to say whether that's
definitely
like going to happen or not. But there will be the frontier models, there will be the custom models that people build, and there will be a lot of open weights models, and I think all of those will exist.
And I assume a lot of the custom models that will be made eventually will probably be built on open source models first, and then potentially scaled from there.
Today it is that, but yeah, we are like with the Nova checkpoint feature. It's a way in which we are giving organizations a way to actually work on a closed model, which is not open weights, but still make their own model out of it, their own version out of it.
Let me bring a counterpoint. I think you mentioned that you think models will be commoditized in the near future. I guess the question overarching is, will we reach a point where the model can kind of do everything or most of the things well? And I maybe bring a quote from Yan LeCun that says that he thinks all of the transformer models that we're using now is like going into a dead end. He's basically saying that the transformer models, based on the architecture is used, reaches a dead end, and we need a new kind of model category.
If not, it's a race to the bottom, basically.
Yes, and he's trying to, he quit Meta because of that, and he want to do a startup, right?
Yep.
So actually I'm saying that maybe it won't be commoditized because we haven't gotten the right answer yet.
Interesting. Juan, what do you think?
Anything to add on?
Yeah, I think my peers has explained a lot. I think I use one of the quotes from our founder. Basically, I think the goal from our company is definitely to transform, find the best way, the optimal way to transform energy into intelligence.
Yep.
So I think we're working on that way.
Okay. I think perhaps like going back to the topic of, I pre-mentioned of like a race to the bottom, right? Because based on what the discussion here is, which is that if models are not commoditized, there definitely will be a frontier model that will be leading, an open source model will be leading. Then for your companies, maybe not Andrew, but for three of you here, is it then like really a zero-sum game for you guys? There can only be one winner and one top model that's being top model company there. Everybody else eventually in 5 years will be like, I wouldn't use like Moonshot or like OpenAI. I'll use like Alibaba because their models are the best of the best. And then supposedly, not biased, I'm not being paid here, but compared to anywhere else, then what's the next steps then for you guys? Do you feel that you'll ever reach that kind of like zero-sum game?
No.
Okay. Great.
Kumbaya,
Why?
everyone.
Kumbaya, yeah.
No, I mean, look, there was a line I saw, I think, a few months ago saying that AI is polytheistic, not monotheistic, right? And this is not necessarily to say that I agree with the idea of AI having like godlike capabilities necessarily. But the reality is that AI adoption is the way you adopt and you deploy AI will determine wallet share, market share, whatever it is, right? And unless you also believe like the top model maker has such an unassailable advantage, they have essentially infinite money to hire infinite go-to-market teams and have infinite solutions architects to go and help every organization, every individual adopt AI in a uniform pattern. It's just unlikely to occur, right? The economics of the industry don't support this.
Definitely.
And so realistically speaking, especially given that you have differences in local regulations, differences in local tech stacks, I don't see a world where you have like one model to rule them all, right? It's just unlikely to happen because of all the real world reasons around feasibility and adoption and so on.
Okay.
I think I also want to jump onto any other thoughts to chime in. If no, I think today actually quite kumbaya and not much fighting.
Yeah,
not much like one model rules it all.
Surprise.
Super. I think then let's move ahead.
To disagree, right? Without one model to rule them all, we actually are fighting.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that actually means more competition.
When you talk about infinite money, I was like recalling all the rounds that's been happening and so on.
Yeah. Actually, maybe because we do have some time before we go to the last question, I do want to drop in here. It's like we saw over the past few weeks that there have been some changes within the AI space. For example, Manus got acquired by Meta. We saw Zhipu and Minimax on the China side get listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange. A lot of discussions about how can you, as larger model companies or AI-related companies, see a path to exit, to continue supporting that large amount of compute power you need to train your models eventually to be the best or compete against each other. What do you think is your take on it in terms of how that's going to develop? Do you feel that the startups and enterprises eventually will just fall behind if they're not part of this particular race in any way? And then eventually will become like one model or a few models that will be completely agentic that can do anything that our startup and enterprise C-suite are trying to do here right now. Then for all of them, they can just kumbaya and retire, I guess. What do you think?
I think, in fact, startups and enterprises are going to be the biggest winners of all the innovation that's coming out of all the labs and everything else, right? And that was what I was trying to also say earlier, that just by looking at there were these models and then we got reasoning within these models and suddenly it created a whole bunch of new possibilities. And there is going to be innovations that we, some of which we can probably imagine today, some of which we can't imagine today, that will keep happening. And those will drive new ways of doing things, right? So if you take coding, for example, just that one domain of development, it's already changed forever. We do not have a single developer who does not use some sort of AI coding assistant today. The preferences of which coding assistant and what kind of methodology and all that might be subjective to different people, but everybody's using something or the other, right? And as we look at how we go into the future with that, it's not just stopping at, I have a really strong coding agent and it'll just help me cut my work into like 4 times faster or 10 times faster or something. There's a lot of other innovation that's coming there. So one of the things that we announced recently was this set of frontier agents that, in addition to the coding agents, you also have these autonomous agents that code in the background while you're going to sleep. They pick up PR requests from your GitHub repository and then look at, I can solve this and go do this without requiring your approval. We released a preview of a security agent that's constantly looking at your organization's security parameters. And the moment there is an issue, it's like there's another agent, which is a DevOps agent. Both of these can, instead of an engineer getting a page and being asked to kind of wake up and go solve something, they may still get the page, they may still wake up, but by the time they come to their computer, the agent has already looked at what is happening, created a report. If it's something that the agent can fix, it's gone and applied a fix already. It's going to kind of completely change how we manage infrastructure in the cloud. It's going to change how we develop applications. So, and this is just one domain that I'm talking about. This can be applied to every single domain where innovation will just keep driving things. I think the coding was like, among all the use cases, it's like the more advanced use case that seemed like a natural fit for that kind of innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I think just 2 points, right? One is I think it's useful to distinguish between different games that are being played within the AI space. The game of performing research to build a really good model is different than the game of deploying it, making it available. It's different than the game of deploying it and making it useful as well, right? So, and the economics actually of all three games differ quite a bit. So it is useful to not conflate these things. The second point is that I think, as was pointed out earlier, additional choice and additional competition among model makers is highly beneficial to app developers, to businesses, to consumers as well, right? And this is one reason why you do see some of the model makers migrating towards app layer type businesses as well, right? Because a lot of the value capture actually occurs at the app layer at this point. Building models and deploying them is a very challenging game economically and technically speaking. And frankly, is not one that I would recommend personally or as a member of OpenAI to the average company. So we're talking about like enterprise or startups trying to build models as a business or as a product. That is something we would discourage you from doing unless you have a very good reason to do so.
I think also want to chime in, like looking ahead, right? For most of like the builders in this room, I think from the perspective of like model evolution that's going to happen in 2026, right? I'm keen to hear from each of you in this from your vantage point, right? What is like for a builder in Southeast Asia, like what's the most exciting opportunities and development on this front? Maybe we'll start with David.
I think I'll go back to the same point as before, that it's really like a buffet. You have a test set, and then you basically decide this is the best thing for me right now. So at this snapshot, I can choose from all of the things here based on my test set. I run the test set in maybe half an hour, and then this becomes my best model, and then I just swap it out. I think that's really the case, and that's really very beneficial to everyone here. And I think second one that will assist the startups is that because you are closest to your customers, right? So you see all of the weird bad cases, all of the unusual things, and these are things that none of the the frontier model providers will really see. At Alibaba, what we're trying to do is trying to make this process much faster, so that we get this information back, we can straight away fine tune the model. But I would say that it's still troublesome. So you guys are really at the front seat. You see all the bad cases. You really can pick out the best model for your use case, so it benefits you.
Yeah, I think two things that we see a lot. I think Thomas showed a demo earlier about voice, and in this part of the world, the number of dialects and the number of languages and things, voice plays an even bigger role in both helping in translations, getting different people to communicate, or even just doing good applications that reach the edge, right? So when it reaches the masses, voice becomes a very, very important interface. And we see a lot of startups doing some really good innovation in that space. And the second I'd say is, again, on the coding aspect, right? Traditionally, it's been India, US, China, having large developer populations, hiring developers and all that has always been a challenge in this part of the world. And just now with coding agents, it just makes it a more level playing field. You don't need that many developers. You can do a lot more. And so it makes it like a very, very fun advantage to have now.
I think for 2026, what I would say is the most exciting thing, again, for startup founders, which is more of my focal point, the most exciting thing is how possible it is to build a globally competitive product and business from anywhere in the world, of course, including Southeast Asia and APAC broadly. I've been involved with the ecosystem here since like 2017, 2018 in various ways. And historically, there's been this sort of mindset where like, oh, we're going to build in Singapore for Southeast Asia. I think the events of the past few years have demonstrated that economically, this is actually not a very good strategy, right? Southeast Asia is a very challenging market for many reasons, economically, fragmentation, and so on. But today, because of the underlying multilingual, multicultural, whatever capabilities, multi-use case capabilities of AI, you can literally create a magical experience for users in the US, in Japan, in Germany, in Turkey, whatever, from day one, right? They might have a little bit of unevenness in terms of like multilingual performance, but actually conceptually it's quite possible, especially with good prompting and context engineering. Before this conference, I just got off a call with a founder from Japan. He's had a successful exit in Japan in sort of the Japanese startup way. Looked a little bit like an SMB. He's on to his next thing. He's building this like multilingual assistant that can tell you your day, that can autonomously go and do research for you. Figure out a way to pair our real-time API with like 120 tool calls. I wasn't even sure how he was able to do that, but somehow he's able to do that. And but he was still thinking like, oh, I should go small, right? I should try to conquer the Japan market, go deep with 10 companies. And I was like, dude, you can go and get like 10,000 companies as users like in the next like 5 months if you play your cards right? So and I think what I would encourage the founders in the audience to really think about is that the barrier to entry for you in going global, international with a very high quality experience is so much lower than it was before.
Oh, definitely.
You do not need to confine yourself to the idea of I'm going to raise in Singapore or Southeast Asia. That paradigm is gone. It's dead. I see a lot of VC friends in the room. I know that they are much more likely to bet on you if you're going global, even if you're in Singapore at this point.
Right.
Talk to me as well. I'm a VC, yes.
Yeah. Kwan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think for 2026, I've been talking to a lot of like our customers,
Right.
a lot of like startup founders and stuff. I feel like there are a lot of like changes in the field, and also what I'm really excited to see is how some of the new ideas been changing the world in a very dramatic way. There are companies founded within 6 months. Their like users have been millions or billions. I guess that's one hand. The other hand is, for Kimi from our end,
Right.
We have been, partnering with such companies and startups. We hopefully to, have some great partnerships in the region as well and help the founders and builders to change the world along the way.
We have like 2 minutes left on the clock. So I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds each to sell what you
One
guys are
plug,
doing.
yeah.
One plug, 30 seconds. Who wants to start? Why should the startup enterprises here come to find
Use
you
your
today?
model.
Yeah, use your model, use your service.
Okay, I go first.
Go. Alibaba, A start first. Go.
China Speed, we work 996.
Wow.
Any issues, bad cases you have, you let us know. Big enough, we'll fine tune it. Yeah,
Okay.
that's my part.
Yes. I guess Kwan should follow up on
Kwan,
this.
996
It has to be
also?
something different.
Yeah, well, I think for us, like I mentioned, we've got two very strong use cases or takeaways. I would like to, for everyone for this event. First one, for our model is one of the top leading
Right.
open source models. The second thing is, our cost only a fraction of the frontier models, 20% ish. So if you look, to try to, optimize your overall operation cost, I think that could be a really good choice as well.
I feel like I
Cost,
shouldn't-
not bad.
feel
Sorry,
like-
same here too. Need to disagree. Yeah.
I feel like I should put both of them closer and I put Thomas the other side so they don't need to like fight. Okay, Thomas, your turn.
If you want to build on what's actually the cutting edge, come talk to us.
Oh, and Pandu.
All right,
what do you have to
AWS.
offer?
So 80% of the tier 1 startups around the world build on AWS already. And all their 3 models are on AWS as well. So
And next time we can do event at AWS office too.
Yes, come back.
Okay, I think that will be it from the first panel. Thank you so much, gents.
Thank
for
you so
wonderful
much.
session.
Please, round of applause for these gentlemen.